Hello everybody. I'm going to talk today about getting on with your dark side, okay? Making peace with the elements of yourself that you would rather people didn't know about. Understanding at a deeper level the aspects of your personality which might be caked in shame or regret or disgust or embarrassment. The parts of you that maybe are hurting you. And I've said in one of my other videos, suffering is pain plus resistance. And I think the point with your dark side is that people often resist the dark side, and that's where the suffering comes from. And so what I want to do is to paint a picture whereby your dark side is actually an extraordinary thing, where it is a gateway to emancipation, to a richer sense of life, to an understanding of yourself which is far, far elevated above what it was before, when you are prepared to confront all of you. Because when you're not prepared to confront all of you, then you're living a facade of life. You're living a wafer-thin portrayal of life. And when you start running away and start engaging and connecting with all of what it is to be you, well, normally the experience is a very, very deep and fruitful one. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, even if you think that there are parts of you that are completely unforgivable, they're still your friend. There's a lot of value in them. Okay, so what is your dark side? Let's start with what. Where did it come from? Why is it there? And what can we do with it? So this is another concept which has come from the eons of psychotherapy. Jung has talked about the shadow. Freud talked a lot about shame, especially sexual shame, and the avoidances that people come to in conclusion. The dark side of us are the parts of us, our secrets, the parts of us that we dare not speak the name, the parts that we will go to the ends of the earth to make sure other people don't see, the parts of us that we think intrinsically are kind of faulty, that they are problems inside of ourselves that somehow or other we can't quite shake off. And the first thing to say is that is a perception. That is an interpretation that you have come to. And it feels right. And so challenge number one is, but it might not be right. Okay. Now for me, there are two sides to the dark side of your psyche. One are things that you just intrinsically feel are you and are unforgivable. These are things which you don't even know why you know them, but because of events which are so far in the past, you can't really remember what occurred. You might not remember it at all, or if you do remember it, you kind of reconstruct it with today's head, and so it doesn't really have the same volatility to it as perhaps it did whenever it occurred. The same amplitude, that was the word I was looking for. But that you've still hung on to the conclusions of. And so you've come to this conclusion that there are elements of you that are wrong for whatever reason. So that's one side. These things which just happened so long ago, where you learned stuff that it just feels intrinsically part of you. You don't even remember where these stories came from, but you just know that there's parts of you that are wrong. Okay, so that's one side. Then there are the mistakes that you have made in life, some of which may be really bad to you, that you should have known better, that you shouldn't have done. The regrets, the guilt, which you are transforming into conclusions which lead to shame, which lead to compounding of those dark side perceptions. So I guess we need to talk about both. Let's start with the first one that I talked about, these conclusions which you don't even really know where they've come from. And for this, we need to talk about developmental theory. So from the day that you were born, and perhaps even before then, perhaps even when you were in the womb, I don't really know, but people come with perceptions when we do when I do regression therapy with people. They will come up with experiences in the womb, whether they're real or whether they are projections of their current mind. I honestly can't tell you, but that certainly comes up. So perceptions from very, very early days that we can't remember today about what we need to do and not do, and say and not say, and act and not act, and think and not think, and feel and not feel, based around the system within which we exist. And obviously, the further back in time you go, the less you can remember it, but also the less power you held at that time. So if we go to, let's just hypothesize that the time between you being born and you being 1, 2 years old, 3 years old, where you are utterly, completely at the behest, under the support, supervision of your parents, who are running on their own rails, running on their own stories, expressing to you what it is to be a correct human being within their definition of the system. Even when you can't speak, even when you don't have a strong understanding of yourself, in those very, very early developmental stages, we can observe young children, infants, already reacting to the expectations of the system in which they live. And as you grow up, we can observe infants being able, as they develop a consciousness as to what is them and what is other, that mother is distinct from them, that objects are distinct from them. You can see the development of what is kind of, comes to be called parts work, where even at a very early age, an infant can exhibit conclusions which seem to suggest that they're already aware of different parts of themselves, things that they kind of want to do but that they know are naughty, for example. And so, because at that early age we are totally dependent upon our parents and we need their support, we need their love, we are utterly vulnerable, and so we need to fit in with their system. But even if we couldn't describe it, we have wants and needs of our own. There is an automatic conclusion as to what is permissible within a system that we are not making. So from a very, very young age, it's almost as if we create an element of our psyche which is like a policeman as to the things that we can do, the things that we can get away with, and the things that we must never do. And every time we do something which results in massive disapproval, then obviously that's going to go on the you must never do list. You come to conclusions which lead you to have this policing mindset as to what is permissible, what is safe, what will gain you approval, and what will gain you disapproval. And already we're growing the dark side of our mind, the dark side of our psyche, our personality, the parts of us that we will be loved for and the parts of us that we may be hated for. And we're completely out of alignment with any choice in that matter. This is all occurring. It's kind of occurring, you know, people say that kids under the age of 6 or 7 spend most of their time in hypnosis anyway. Our parents are our greatest hypnotists. So we are absorbing everything. So from those very, very early days, we come to conclusions. Every day that we live, we see the light of today through the reflection of our prior conclusions. And so we tend to live out a predictable set of conclusions based upon the earlier perceptions. So we end up with a compounded set of conclusions based upon even earlier conclusions. So it gets to the point where, you know, first days at school, you already have a story running inside of your head of how that's going to pan out. You know, teenage years, adolescence, body changes, girlfriends, university, whatever it may be, first job, all the way up dealing with your maniacal boss, you know, dealing with problematic school teachers, rerunning the relationship with your parents as you come to see yourself from different perspectives. The entire thing, all of these challenging parts of life tend to be seen through a veil which has been created at an age which is before you can even recall it, which defines what it is to be approved of, disapproved of, loved, unloved, appreciated, all this kind of stuff. Since we got onto it, let's talk about these issues as well, these mistakes, okay? So later in life, at any point, whatever you want to call later in life, you are going to do things that you think at that moment are the right thing to do. And some of them are going to work out well, and some of them are not. And unfortunately, we think we should have anticipated what went wrong. We should have known better, and we should have done something different. Whereas in practice, the way that events occur in life is that based upon the knowledge that we have at a certain juncture in time, we come to conclusions that drive our actions. Yeah, it's all very well looking back with the benefit of hindsight, but at the time we didn't have hindsight. So much like when you're learning to walk, you fall, right? You stumble, you learn why you fell, and you course correct, and you do something different until eventually you learn how to walk, right? Well, it's kind of the same with all aspects of humanity. So we are going to do things which have unintended consequences. We may even do things which have consequences we intended because there were other issues which seemed more important at the time. We come with a priority list of what it is which is important to us, our basic human needs. And then we go out, we set out in life to achieve them to the best of the ability that we can, based upon our knowledge at that time. Some of which is going to go well, some of which is going to do nothing at all, some of which may go really badly wrong. So if you learn from the risk manager inside of your head about the things that you do that go wrong, you may compound your sense of your dark side, your sense of shame, okay? Typically, it takes the average person 6 or 7 good learning events to counteract one bad learning event. Okay, we are a risk management machine. We are designed to protect ourselves by avoiding the bad situations. So we tend to overestimate our mistakes, overemphasize our mistakes, and underemphasize our successes, because that keeps us safe. But it's not fair, it's not rational, it's just a result of our organistic tendencies. So we come to all of these conclusions today, in this moment, as to what we are, based around some circumstances which were outside of our control, based upon other circumstances which were within our control, where we made what transpired to be a bad choice. And we look at everything that we think we are today, and we judge from that how we'll get approval from others, how we will feel safe, how we will feel loved, how we will feel significant, how we will learn, how we will grow, how we will contribute to the world. All of that based around the stories of what we think we are. Can you see from that how fragile our concept of a dark side could be? Because it feels enormous, right? It feels possibly even larger than other parts of us. It depends upon the individual, but what we're talking about is a set of characteristics about ourself that, because we think they're so bad, we will do everything under our power to make sure that they do not see the light of day, that they are not exhibited. We will have a policeman inside of our head that sends those naughty parts of us into exile, as far away as is humanly possible. We'll have a set of policemen that are there to make sure that our generalized persona doesn't ruffle feathers when it comes to those shameful issues. And then we'll have a few absolute firefighters that will slam the gate shut if something occurs out of control. And so depending upon how bad your dark side is, you may be on a degree of fight, flight, freeze in a generalized state if you feel as though that policeman needs to be there on a regular basis, like you have this radar going, checking to make sure that you don't make a mistake. Again, it depends upon the consequences of these learning events that occurred whenever they occurred. And because they're shameful, because thou shalt not exhibit that part of yourself, well, we never really relearn our perception of them, because we're so desperate to keep them inside a box. You know, the way that we shift our perception of something is by seeing other people's perception and by seeing the results of what we do and coming to conclusions. But these shameful sides of us are so locked in a box that we don't get that opportunity. So they sit there festering. Let's take a step back. Let's talk about why. What's the good of this? Okay, and the universal truth that I apply myself by is that all emotions are valid messengers. They're all useful. There is a story behind them, and as soon as we've paid attention to the story, they don't need to bang on the door anymore. They don't need to shout so loudly. So if we consider your dark side as this sort of forbidden element of your personality, certain characteristics of your identity perhaps that are not to be portrayed, the message is, if I don't do this, then I will be approved or loved, or I'll get a promotion, or I'll make my way in world easier. Yeah. So it's like a game that we're playing with ourselves. If this, then this. If not this, catastrophe. Yeah. So whether you want to call it your dark side, or shame, or embarrassment, or regret, they're all mechanisms by which you are protecting yourself, right? A human being is a social animal. We need connection with other human beings. So there is a fantastic use to a sense of embarrassment, even to a sense of guilt. Okay, what's going on is you're saying, look, don't do this, and also make amends for what you did, because other people are important too. So they're all useful messages. They're just as useful as the happiness and do more of this feels good sort of thing. So on that basis, you need to pay attention to them, right? To go back to what I was saying before about suffering, when you push them away, you kind of ache, right? There's parts of you which are so fortified that you can't experience the full range of your emotions. By limiting one end of the spectrum, you kind of end up limiting the other end of the spectrum. You stop trusting your potential to be in the present moment. You stop trusting your potential to relax and just be you. Because if you do, God knows what might happen. If I forget my policeman, stuff might come out, and I daren't have that. So you're limiting the full extent of your experience. So the way to regain the full extent of your experience is by diving into the parts of you that apparently are your dark side. What's going to permit you to do that, right? Lots of things, any one of which could do it. Shocks to the system that make you aware of what it is that you are saying to yourself or doing to yourself can do it. Reading an amazing book can do it. I read a book called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell by William Blake. Okay, no matter how much you might look for heaven, the only thing that's certain is that you're going to find the hell. You could go and talk to a support group, perhaps, and you can see that other people have similar conclusions to you, and that what you thought was taboo, in actual fact, is part of being human. There's lots and lots of different ways that you can come to a different perspective. But you have to take that first step of challenging what you think you know, what you think you are. So, if we go back to what it was that I was saying before, that our very, very early experiences create a conclusion of what it is that's safe, what it is to be approved of, what it is to feel significant, what it is to be unloved, avoided, abandoned, and that then every subsequent event is seen in the light of those, and so we kind of compound what we already think we know. I very briefly dropped into the ocean that system has been created by our parents or our authority figures, and at different times of life, the systems within which we exist are always, to some extent controlled by authority figures. They set the agenda. They set the things which are approved of and disapproved of. More importantly, they set the things which are taboo, the things which are not to be spoken. So if we go back to that very, very early stage, your parents or whoever it was that was looking after you, they already, they're adults. They already have their own opinion of what it is to have things which are approved of and disapproved of. They already have their own sense of their dark side. And so they're going to already have things which they are able to freely express and things which they are absolutely not. And in a very, very young individual, you pick up on it. We reverberate with others, and we come to learn what it is that has to be avoided. So, number one on the list, when you are considering the things that are bad about you, is it my shame? What was it that led me to that conclusion? Did I choose it? Or did I infer it from someone in a position of authority? If I wrote that down and handed it to somebody else and asked them to evaluate it, would they look at it like I look at it? Would they come to the same conclusion? Okay, but essentially, is this my shame or is this inherited? Yeah. What is leading me to the conclusions that I have, and did I ever choose that? And obviously, the younger it is that you're going back to, the less there was any element of choice. Another way that you might want to look at it is, are my facts even correct? So could you write down the facts that underpin whatever it is that you consider to be a dark aspect of your personality? The events that led up to that, the conclusions, the results of that, the perception that you gained from that. And with today's head, bearing in mind that memory is fallible and that we will reconstruct our memories based upon today's head, of the minutiae of detail which you understand from the situation that created the shame-based, dark side, unforgivable story, are those facts correct? Or are they not your facts? Do they come from culture? Do they come from a certain larger-than-life member of the family, or some mentor-type character who led you to conclusions at certain times in your life? Yeah. So, did you choose it? Even if you did choose it, are the facts on which it was created correct? And then, even if with both of those conclusions you come to yes, you can still look at the individual that chose that concluded that at that time, based upon the knowledge that you had at that time. And then look at yourself today. Look yourself in the mirror today and say, well, based on today's head, would I have more options, more opportunities, more ways to act that I had no choice about at that time? Yeah. And then another one still is this conclusion useful for me going forward? I have another video where I talk about games people play. If you can get to that stage of, okay, is this conclusion useful going forward? You might want to ask yourself right now, when you think about that circumstance, what game am I playing? Yeah. Because there is a reason behind maintaining the story about yourself. Yeah. I don't know what that game is, but I assure you, if you call it a game and you ask yourself, what game is it that I am playing by supporting that idea, you will get a result. And then the question is, is this game good for me? Do I want to continue playing this game? You know, you may say when you come to the game that you're playing, and what is it about that game? And you may want to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers down. But if you understand the game that you're playing by maintaining that shame-based dark side ideology of an element of yourself, that it's not indeed helpful for you. And then there may well be better ways. The reason I talk about these things in hypnotherapy is obviously because it's easier to discuss painful aspects of the psyche when we are being less judgmental of ourselves. That's why I find hypnosis a very fruitful state of mind to be in when considering what it is that you think yourself. You're less likely to objectify and judgmentalize that part of you, and instead see it in more of a harmonious state of yourself. But anyway, that's kind of going off track. So you'll come to a whole series of conclusions, which may lead you eventually to the conclusion that what you thought you knew, you didn't know. That what you thought you knew, you were forced into learning. That what you thought you knew was based on incorrect facts. That what you thought you knew might have been correct at the time, but it certainly isn't correct today. That what you thought you knew is still correct today, but in actual fact, there are better ways to tackle it. There's a whole variety of different ways. And then similarly, for the events, the mistakes that you've made at times of your life that you should have known better. Yeah. Human beings make mistakes, okay? We cannot go back in time. The act of ruminating upon something means that we are not in the present moment. We are in the past. We're trying, therefore, to fix something which is unfixable because it's already occurred. The only thing that we have today in our choice is our actions today. And so we make those based upon the knowledge that we have today about what it is that is good for us today. What is our priority in life? So whatever we've done in the past that turned out to be a massive mistake, that we created a policeman and said, don't do that again. The only thing that we can do from it is learn from it. We cannot rectify what occurred in the past, but we can choose our response today. Yeah. And again, like in all things, all we are is changing. And so the person that you are today is different from the person that you were then. And you may be able to come to a conclusion, therefore, that, okay, it was enormous feedback. It was something that I really wish I hadn't done. But I have learned from it, and I know now that if I recognize a circumstance which feels or looks or seems similar, I will choose differently this time. Yeah, and I'm a member of the human race. Something like that. So, but the whole idea is to understand that our perception today of what we think we are is a veil. It is a story. It is a snapshot today based upon our understanding of our objectification of all the things that have gone on in our life, the majority of which have now been handed over to our subconscious. And we're not really even sure that they're running anymore. We just have this sense, a felt sense somewhere inside of us about this dark side of us, this toxic element. I talk in some of my videos about human needs, okay? So we have a series of human needs, and they're all important, and some of them pull against each other. So it's almost impossible to fulfill everything that you choose to do so without making compromises. Yeah. And what we're talking about when you consider the dark side is that the compromises you made, you learned were not the best compromises. But at the time you did the best you could, right? Even if the conclusion was horrendous, was awful, based upon the stories that were running inside your head at that time, it made sense. So then the only thing you can do now is understand that. It's open yourself up to it. It's leaning into the experience and choosing today's response, choosing the learning, choosing the actions that you're going to take, rather than allowing all this to run on autopilot like it has done in the past. So you're challenging what it is to be you. You're challenging your understanding of what you think or thought you were. And every moment you have the ability to reassess. And you'll be right sometimes and wrong sometimes. But that in itself is not a dark element. That's an element of humanness. So then we get on to the good side of your dark side. And for me, this is the best by far. If you can go down that journey, if you can shed a few tears for yourself, if you can look at yourself and forgive yourself for what you thought you knew, and you can start to see all of the things that you did in your life in the reflected light of those prior conclusions, and you can start to understand that all of the things that you've done subsequently that you thought you did with free will, you actually did based upon this criteria of the story of your place in the world. Then you can forgive yourself for that. Then you can start to learn from it. And here's the richness of that, okay? When you do that, when you stop resisting the parts of yourself that are disapproved of, and you lean into them, and you embrace all of what it is to be you, you're relating to yourself rather than objectifying yourself. The world that had these kind of spiky, painful bits to it goes a little bit softer, a little bit more woolly. Because you're in a sense of presence with yourself, a sense of relation with yourself rather than observation and objectification of yourself, there is a noticeable felt shift where you start to observe and feel all of you and coming to conclusions about that, which cannot fail but have an impact upon tomorrow. Because the act of forgiving yourself for these parts of you that you came to poor conclusions about allows them air to breathe. It allows you, even if only by the smallest percentage more, to go there, to re-experience and to newly experience. And so it allows that policeman element to diminish. And so you are feeling less under personal pressure, less guilt, less shame, less darkness. In actual fact, you're reassessing what you thought to be dark, and with every act that you reassess the dark, well, there's more light and there's more understanding. You cannot have light without dark. The two go hand in hand. They are yin and yang, right? They are defined by each other. And so there is a goodness to the darkness. It teaches you your limits. It teaches you your values, your needs, your motivations. Yeah? It helps you understand what it is to be you, and it helps you take a step back and give yourself a massive hug, right? Effectively, come back on your own side through a felt sense of what it is to be you and where that came from and what that truly means, rather than self-flagellating and policing. Once you free yourself in that way, then you get that bandwidth back about the range of emotions that it's permissible to experience. And so that's where you find joy. That's where you find motivation. That's where you find mojo. It's only by permitting yourself to be everything that you can permit yourself ecstasy as well as tragedy. Yeah, it's all a continuum. It's all the same spectrum. And so you free yourself to be everything, whereas before you were limiting yourself. So I think in actual fact that in knowing your dark side, there is the most wonderful end result. But somehow or other, you have to just pass over that little hurdle and go, right, I'm going to look a little closer at this. It might feel dreadfully bad, but I might be wrong. And then go with that. think that's all I need to say on dark side. I hope that's useful. I also have a video on YouTube, which is shorter. The reason I did this was because that one was very very popular, and it created a lot of comments. So I thought it might be useful to extrapolate and do something extra. So thanks for watching. If this is of interest, or listening for that matter, if this is of interest, subscribe. Have a look at the other things that I am commenting on, pontificating on, in an effort to help you find your own state of transcendental euphoria, let's say. All right. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye.